So yes, as Christine says, this year I wrote a book called The Internet of Animals, and it's due out next March. You can actually go onto the Polity Books website and you can see the blurb there and even pre-order it, I think, already. And I'm just actually going through the copy-edited manuscript this week as well. So it's all in production. And so what I want to talk about today in the 15 minutes I have is just some of the key concepts. Obviously, I can't cover everything because, you know, it's a book. It's a short book, though. It's 50,000 words, but still, I do try and cover a lot of ground in the book. So here's the cover. And I guess one thing to say there too is I had to, when discussing the cover with my publishers, I constantly fought back with them actually about the cute animal, because the obvious, you know, when people think about the Internet of Animals, and when I use that term, I meant the Internet of Animals, but also the Internet and animals. So it's very, very inclusive of all the sort of digital media and devices that we use across every kind of animal these days, from wildlife to companion animals to farm animals. They're all covered in the book. And when discussing the cover with the publishers, they wanted your standard cute dog or cat, you know, staring at a computer and all that kind of thing. And I said, look, that's been done to death. Also, I really want to show the power of animals. I don't want the cutification of animals to be on the cover. I want kind of the you know, the power and vibrancies of animals to really come out on the cover. And I actually found this image myself, and I'm really proud of it because, and unfortunately they accepted it and were happy with it, because it really does encapsulate a lot of the sort of effective forces and vitalities and vibrancies that I discuss in the book. So the book brings together lots of my interests, past and kind of current and future interests. So internet studies, surveillance studies, critical data studies, more than human theory, digital sociology, sociology of food, sociology of the family, sociology of health, sociology of futures, and sociology of animals, all coming together in the book. There is a chapter where here we go, here's the chapters. Chapter 2, I do cover all the major theoretical perspectives that I'm drawing on in the book, with that, you know, that background that I just discussed coming together and synthesizing it and showing how I'm building on those topics and areas of interest, a lot of which I've published previous books on as well. So I'm sort of seeing this book as a trajectory and going away from the human-centric focus that I have had in most of my previous work to looking at other animals. So yes, chapter 2, conceptualizing humans, animals, and human-animal relations. Chapter 3 looks at animal enthusiasts, activism, and politics in digital media. So looking at things like the vegan movement, the anti-animal cruelty movement, organizations such as PETA, PETA, and how they use digital media and websites and GIFs and memes to really push the message forward about their sort of anti-cruelty and animal rights platforms. Then chapter 4, the quantified animal and data valence. So that's very much drawing on my work on the quantified human self that I've published a lot on in the past, and also on the ways that digital media and devices are used to datify humans, and now applying that to animals. Again, I look at a whole range of animals there. I do look at wildlife. I do look, so the sort of sensors and drones that are used to quantify and datify both wildlife and farm animals, but also companion animals, because of course there are more and more devices around now for pets for them, like collars and so on, that can be worn to monitor and measure their movements and their sleeping and feeding activities. And actually what I say in that chapter as well, I sort of draw an analogy there between how we use apps and wearables to monitor our human infants, as we're often doing that now with companion animals, as in a very similar way, because we're thinking now about companion animals as our fur babies. And that's often a term that's used a lot to sell these kinds of devices in relation to companion animals. Then I have a chapter on animal cuteness, therapy, and celebrity online. So that is where I do bring in animals like Grumpy, the famous Grumpy cat there, doing its thing. I mean, really interesting to think about ethically is that Grumpy cat and several other animals that have got a lot of media attention and celebrity are actually disabled animals, and their unusual appearance is because they were born with a disability. So that's something to consider, I think, ethically. But something that I really talk a lot about throughout the book too is the way that animals are used more and more as therapy objects. Whether it's zoomorphic care animals like Paro, the seal, used in aged care, for example, or the sort of furry robots that are used, the dog-like furry robots that are also used for therapy with different age groups, from children up to older people. But also your petting zoo, for example. We're seeing more and more that animals are used just to provide, you know, emotional support and comfort to humans. And I think there's a lot of ethical issues to think about there, particularly as in the context of the book, you know, how these therapeutic uses of animals are datafied and digitized. Then chapter 6 looks at animal avatars and zoomorphic robots. So that's where I do focus on how cuteness cultures, and very much I do relate that to Japanese kawaii culture that Meg was just talking about as well, because of course that a lot of the kind of cultural concepts of cuteness in zoomorphic robots do come principally out of Japan. But also animal avatars in games. So more and more, like for example, that bottom image there, you know, the smartphone app where mostly children are encouraged to engage with, it's a bit of a Tamagotchi idea, to care for animals or to groom them or play with them or decorate them, do makeovers on them and so on. But also the types of online games where there's often violence against animals. You kill animals, they're part of your resources to be used as part of the game, for example. And then in conclusion, I think about reimagining human-animal relations. And something I do in the conclusion too is look at the way that arts-based representations of animals in the context of broader ecologies have been a really interesting digitized way of making humans become more attuned to our relationships with other living creatures. So I end on a hopeful note, I should say, and because I can see a way forward for how digital technologies might be used to better care for the environment, including animals, but also other living creatures. So what I say in the book is the ways in which animals are portrayed, monitored and cared for by humans using digital media and devices have significant implications for how humans and animals will live together in the near future. So human and animal health and well-being, environmental sustainability and activism, industries related to digital technology development, animal care, animal protection, food production and consumption, smart homes and cities. They're all part of the Internet of Animals and becoming more and more entangled and intertwined in terms of our relationships with animals and how we care for them and how we don't care for them, how we treat them as objects, how we use them as therapy, how we cutify them. All those things come into play across these major themes in the book. And key issues examined include the ever-expanding impulse towards anthropomorphizing animals. So more and more of this, you know, we love to see, you know, the grumpy cat is just such a great example of how we anthropomorphize animals. We see them as displaying and sort of chiming in with human affects, with human facial expressions and moods and feelings. And this is very common in GIFs and memes. The rise and impact of cuteness cultures, I think, are really having a lot to, as I say, across games, across robots, lots of different ways that we represent animals in GIFs and memes again. The move towards positioning animals as therapeutic objects I've talked about, the growing interest globally in and concern about the health of the natural environment and other living things. So that is something that I do discuss throughout the book. But also something that I identified as I looked across the different digital devices and technologies that I discuss in the book is a counter discourse that represents animals and nature as a dangerous other. That's always that sort of binary opposition that we've had, you know, basically for a very long time now, particularly since the Enlightenment and scientific ways of thinking and this positioning of, you know, other animals as other to ourselves and as, you know, as humans as being superior to other animals. That's something that I really spend a lot of time looking at, and how digital devices and media contribute to that or can potentially undermine that way of thinking. So questions addressed, yes, and I have got the cute cat there staring at the computer. How are human-animal relationships changing, and how are digital media and devices contributing to this change? What do humans and other animals lose and gain when animals are digitised and datafied? What are the implications for both human and animal health and well-being, and at a larger scale for planetary health? And these are kind of theoretical concepts that I draw on throughout the book. Concepts of entanglement, kinship, relational connections between us and other living creatures and place and space in the world. And these are some of the key books or sets of books that I've been really engaging with and drawing on in this book. Here's just a few memes that I made just to encapsulate some of the key arguments. So we have cuteness making people want to protect animals, but cuteness objectifying and demeaning animals, which draws a bit on what Meg has just said, that cuteness can be a two-edged sword, because there's questions there about the dignity of animals and how we always want to sort of see them as babies, even if they're adult animals, and wanting to have that cuteness affect going on with a range of lots of different animals, particularly furry ones. I actually start the book talking about this account called Cats Being Weird Little Guys, which is really popular on Twitter and also on Instagram. As you can see, it's got 1.7 million followers on Twitter, very popular. And I just start the book by just looking at that discourse, cats being weird little guys. There's a whole lot going on in that title of that account. Being weird, okay, they're amusing. You know, we find their animal-like behaviour amusing and gives us a laugh. Little guys, you know, anthropomorphic discussion of them as, you know, guys, but as little guys. So that sort of cuteness thing coming in as well, along with the weirdness. And this is just a quote from the book. So digital feline images and humans' responses to them online are suffused with ambivalent emotional forces, enchantment and amusement, but also hints of contempt and aggression, sometimes bordering on cruelty. And I see a lot of that in these kinds of accounts. And I have to say that, you know, I'm not positioning myself as outside these affects and forces. I love a cute cat or dog or any other kind of cute animal as much as anyone else. I do have a cat at home, you know, but I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, I'm implicating myself, but also saying, what does it mean for every other human when we cutify animals, when we see them as a therapy object, when we laugh at them being in sometimes very difficult situations? What does that say about us and our relationships with animals? Something else I say in the book is that we do continue to very much distinguish between, you know, lovable and cute animals and those that we don't find lovable or that we find pests in some way. So this is, I mean, nature is scary, especially pests and bugs, but I love nature, especially furry animals. There's very much that binary still going on when we look at the way that animals are digitized and datafied and surveilled and monitored and all cutified or not cutified or seen as important and precious or seen as disposable, as something we eat, that we engage in factory farming, that we kill without a care, how some animals, especially the furry ones, are worthy of protection, how other animals such as, you know, pests, animals we see as pests, you know, insects, snakes, as Gavin mentioned earlier, and other reptiles, head lice, mosquitoes, all those animals we consider as pests to humans, we tend not to be quite so sentimental about, and we tend not to cutify. So I find that a lot of the animal ethics discourse does tend to talk mostly about the furry, warm-blooded animals. So even though a term in animal ethics is speciesism, I'm saying, well, sometimes it can be a bit speciesist. What about the non-vertebrates? We often don't hear about slugs and snails and squashy things, and as I say, like lice and worms that live inside people's bodies. You know, there seems to be not that much concern about their rights. And also sentient-ist. So there's a lot of talk in animal ethics about animal sentience. And, you know, I find that quite anthropomorphic because it does sort of make a comparison between how so-called intelligent or sentient, aware of the world some animals are, and how that should be used as a way to sort of weigh up to what extent they should be given rights. And just finally, I'm going to talk about, because I know my time's almost up, I talk about this project in the book. So I did do an online survey back in 2021, and I used some of the it was an open-ended, mostly open-ended. People had text boxes that they could type in some answers, because it seemed to me, and I think there still is the case, there hasn't been a lot of research on how actually people are using the internet to share information about animals, to find information, to amuse themselves, to find therapy. So I did do an online survey with 130 participants, and these are just some of the results. There's my timer, so I've just got one more slide. So people who answered were very keen internet users or app users to upload and share information about their pets or any other animals. They did tend to look at animal-related content for entertainment purposes. That was a very strong reason they looked at animal content. Quite a few of them, a bit under half, did use content for dietary, political activism purposes. 40% do follow social media influencers, and 16% said that they use smartphone apps or wearable devices or any other smart device to better understand or care for their pet or any other animal. And finally, I thought, this is in my conclusion, this actually in my conclusion chapter, because this was really interesting. I had this future-oriented question at the very end. If you could design a new technology to help you better understand or care for your pet or any other animals, what would it be? Please describe what it would do. And what I found is really interesting in that people really want to better understand the animals they engage with. Again, often it's their companion pets that they're talking about, but not always. Sometimes it is wildlife, not so much farm animals. They really want digital tech that helps them understand the feelings of animals, to interpret if they're well, to get some sense of their well-being so that they can care for them. So I find that quite poignant, because as I say in the book, there's a lot of in the networks of data, apps, social media and smart technologies that comprise the Internet of Animals, animals are both highly visible and invisible, their rights, needs and welfare largely ignored. And that's what we just see constantly, the objectification of animals through digital media and devices, through all the different media and devices that I examine in the book. Thanks very much.